Okay, so today we're jumping into a fascinating story out of Santa Monica, California. It's about a tax policy that, well, has had some really dramatic and maybe totally unintended consequences. We're talking about good intentions, a real estate market that's hit the brakes, and how one single dollar, literally $1, could end up costing someone almost $500,000. All right, to really get a handle on just how big of an impact this has, let's play out a little scenario. It's something that's actually happening in Santa Monica as we speak. So just picture two luxury homes, right? They're pretty much identical, but there's one tiny difference: their final price tag. So could one single dollar really cost you $400,000? I know, it sounds completely insane, right? But in Santa Monica's market, it is the cold, hard reality. Let's just look at the numbers. Okay, so here's where things get absolutely wild. If you sell your place for, say, $7,999,999, just $1 shy of $8 million, your transfer tax is around $48,000. Okay, but if you sell it for exactly $8 million, that tax bill just explodes. It skyrockets to nearly $450,000. I mean, that's a $400,000 jump for one extra dollar. No way. So you're probably asking, what on earth is causing this insane tax cliff? Well, it all comes down to a voter-approved initiative called Measure GS. You might have heard it called the mansion tax. All right, first, a real quick refresher. A transfer tax isn't like your annual property tax bill. It's a one-time fee that the seller pays when they sell the property. Pretty much every city has one, but Santa Monica's? Well, let's just say it's special. So, back in November of 2022, voters gave Measure GS the green light. And look, the idea behind it had a really clear social goal, right? The whole point was to raise a bunch of money for some of the city's biggest problems. You know, things like homelessness and affordable housing, by putting a bigger tax on super high-end property sales. This chart really breaks it all down. So, for most sales, you've got your standard LA County tax and the regular Santa Monica City tax. Pretty normal stuff. But then look at that bottom row. As soon as a property sells for $8 million or more, the rate doesn't just go up a little, it leaps from 0.6% to a whopping 5.6%. And that is where that massive $400,000 difference is coming from. And here's a really, really important point. Even though people call it the mansion tax, it is not just for mansions. It applies to pretty much every kind of real estate. We're talking apartment buildings, commercial buildings, even a plot of empty land. If it's in Santa Monica and the price tag is over $8 million, bam, it gets hit with this tax.
Okay, so the goal was to raise money. Makes sense. But what was the actual impact on the market once this thing went live? Well, the data we have now, it tells a pretty shocking story.
So here's the timeline we're looking at. Voters said yes in late 2022. The tax officially started on March 1st, 2023. And now we've got a full year's worth of data to see what really went down. And boy, was the impact immediate. Check this out. In the year before the tax, Santa Monica saw 32 home sales over that $8 million mark. In the year after, just 15. That's a 53% drop. The market for these high-end homes was basically sliced in half, just gone. And if you think that's bad, take a look at what happened with commercial properties and apartment buildings. The hit there was even worse. Sales plummeted from 18 deals down to only 5. That's a 72% nosedive. It's like developers and big investors just packed up and went home. The deals just stopped happening. And you have to remember, a real estate deal isn't just about the buyer and the seller, right? There is an entire ecosystem of local businesses and professionals whose livelihoods depend on these sales actually going through. So yeah, that slowdown created this huge ripple effect across the community. Industry estimates say that business for folks like contractors, stagers, realtors, you name it, in this specific market segment dropped by a staggering 60%. That's a huge hit. Well, as you can imagine, a market reaction that dramatic did not go unnoticed. And in response to this major slowdown, there's now a movement to try and, well, course correct.
So there's a new initiative on the table, and it's being spearheaded by a former mayor of Santa Monica, Pam O'Connor. Now, they're not trying to get rid of the tax completely. Instead, the idea is to carve out a very specific exemption for multifamily properties, like apartment buildings.
The folks who support this change say it's absolutely essential. Their argument is that it'll make it financially viable for developers to actually start building housing again. That would help the city meet its housing goals, which are mandated by the state, and hopefully kickstart some of that local economic activity that's stalled out.
But as you might guess, this proposal has kicked off a whole new debate, and it's really splitting opinions on what the right thing to do for Santa Monica is.
And the whole debate pretty much boils down to this. On one side, you've got the people saying, hey, we need to encourage development and stimulate the economy. But on the other side, you have opponents arguing that this change completely guts the original point of the measure, that it ignores what the voters actually decided, and that it's really just a handout for wealthy developers.
And here's a really interesting twist in the story. One of the loudest voices against this new exemption is another former mayor, Sue Himmelrich. And get this, she was one of the biggest champions of the original Measure GS. Her argument is that this change would completely undermine the funding for affordable housing that the tax was supposed to generate in the first place.
So where do things stand now? Well, for the moment, the future's kind of up in the air. This whole initiative to change the law has been bogged down in legal challenges, so it hasn't even made it onto a ballot for voters to have their say yet.
And all of this really leaves us with a big, complicated question, doesn't it? The people of Santa Monica voted for a tax that was supposed to help fund critical services, but the numbers seem to show that it may have put a deep freeze on a really important part of their economy. It's just a classic example of good intentions versus unintended consequences, and it forces the whole community to ask a tough question. At what point does a solution actually become part of the problem?